Welcome back, college basketball fans, to another exciting. What, David?
Well, I'm just excited.
Oh,
It's that time of the year again. You know what time of year it is, don't you, Chad?
you
David, I
talking
know it was a
Christmas?
Time for the
wonderful
time Diamond Head Classic.
David, it was a wonderful gesture for you to sing those Christmas carols to the kids in the hospital, but
I
shouldn't you
was
have at least
drunk.
told the nurse that you were going to tell them stories about the Diamond Head Classic beforehand?
That's what I went. I sung them Diamond Head Classic carols.
All right, everybody, if you pay attention here at the end of the show, David Griggs is going to sing you a Diamond Head Classic Christmas Carol, but you have to wait to the end of the show for that. I'm your host, Chad
No
Sherwood,
one will still be watching by
joined by
then.
David Griggs. Well, that's why I wanted to save it for the end of the show. So,
Yeah.
and John Stalika down below us. This is our Hoops HD report, a limited panel tonight. The rest of the guys on our normal shows are off, actually, I guess, enjoying the holiday season.
Enjoying the Diamond Head Classic.
We, however, are here to talk about everything going on among the major conferences and preview the week ahead as well. What else do we do on the show? I don't know.
That's about it.
Okay.
Tell stories. There was some off the court news, I think. Or
What
was
off the court news?
We'll get to it once I remember what it was.
Okay.
It involves Memphis. I don't think we've been on the air since Wiseman left school.
No, we
But
have
but
not.
we will do that. We will cover that when we get to Memphis.
Okay, if you want to hear about Wiseman, wait till we get to the American. But we're going to start with a conference that had an amazing week this past week, and uh, and for the last 3, 4, 5 years, I think the Big 12 has been the number one rated conference in America at the end by Ken Palm, at least at the end of every single season. The Big East Big 12 Challenge Series wound up this week, and we ended up with an 8-2 Big East thrashing of the mighty Big 12 in this event. And look at what the Big East did this past week. Only one loss by the entire conference. And we're not talking that they were playing bye games. There were major competition here from the entire conference, including Villanova over Kansas, Creighton winning at Arizona State, St. John's knocking off Arizona, Butler over Purdue. David, what a week by the Big East.
It was for all the reasons you just said. Creighton, a real big week. You mentioned Arizona State. How about beating Oklahoma pretty handily? So two, games for their resume as opposed to it was pretty flat before. Georgetown, while playing bye games, they just continue to win despite the depleted roster. And I really just have to tip my cap to them. This is an incredible job by their coaches and players to come out there and continue to win at the clip that they have been, despite being so short-handed and losing so many key players, either to suspension or discipline or just quitting or whatever. The Johnnies, holy crap! Like, what a week they had. And Stalika's Xavier team looking like an NCAA tournament team for the first time all season.
Well, Western Carolina and TCU, but Stalika, you want
no,
to talk about them?
TCU, they went in there and blasted them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stalika?
Yes. Would you like me to talk about Xavier, or would you like me to talk about some of these other teams?
You can talk about whatever team you want to talk about. The floor is yours.
Well, we don't want to go too much into the Western Carolina game because that was 20 minutes of bad basketball and 20 minutes of Xavier playing better basketball. But the TCU game, at least for the first 36 minutes, it was looking about as complete a game that Xavier had played all year, at least in terms of hitting from the field and defending well. About the only thing that went wrong in that game was 18 turnovers, which was more than their ideal mark, which would have been 11. But by the same token, at least now they'll have about a week to prepare for Villanova.
Yeah, and you look here also, the only loss by the conference was Providence, who's been really bad this season, losing Florida. But then they turned around and they beat Texas, and not only beat him 70-48.
Yeah, and this is a Texas team that was rolling. I think they only had one loss prior to that and several really good wins. So is Providence finally sort of coming out of their funk? I mean, you see this sometimes. It's like teams struggle early, then they get done with their classes, and it's Christmas break, and it's just something kind of almost resets. Is Providence going through that a little bit? And how about this? I mean, we mentioned only one loss, but if I counted right, somebody count them again real quick. I count them going 10-1 in non-bye games. I mean, that is a phenomenal week.
9-1 or 10-1, but I think you're right there. It really is. If you look at in the polls that were released today. We're recording this here Monday evening around 9 o'clock. Providence, the only team that didn't receive votes in at least one of the two polls. Every single team in the top 100 in all the predictive metrics. I mean, look at the net ratings. Other than Providence, the worst net rating is Xavier's 51. That tells you could be talking about a 9-bid league right now if the season
right. And
right
how
now.
about the KPI? Holy cow!
According to Kevin, who runs the KPI, he was supposed to be releasing them any day now. So they still are not out as of this morning.
They're never
Hopefully
up
by
next
week we'll have KPIs out.
They're like you in brackets. You just
just took a couple of these team sheets here. I mean, the huge one was Villanova's win over Kansas in a really great game on Saturday. But then you throw in what Butler did with the Purdue win. I mean, which was a very good Purdue team.
That was another case of Butler getting out to a pretty big lead. And Purdue, they actually did make a bit of a run late in the game, but Butler was never in any serious danger of losing that game.
Well, Butler isn't just one of the stories in the Big East. They're one of the stories nationally. Coming into the year, I think they were picked to finish 9th, or we would thought they might finish last. A complete reloading job from a team that was real unimpressive. But on top of that, they were dealing with injuries early on. They have their only loss, a 1-point loss to a top 10 Baylor team on the road. I mean, that is how close they are from being in the discussion for a 1 seed right now.
Exactly. I mean, one more bye game against Louisiana Monroe this weekend, and then it's conference play. Villanova on the left side there. Two times that they step out of conference during January and February. UConn at home, Temple on the road, but conference play coming there as well.
Yeah, and the Big East, it's just one of those. You're just sort of salivating at Villanova Butler, like Villanova Georgetown. But I mean, well, just about anybody versus anybody.
The way St. John's, Marquette, Creighton, Georgetown are playing, there's going to be almost every game is going to be a good one this season.
Yeah, I'll be honest. St. John's, I think, was the biggest surprise because we'd all just assumed that once Shamorie Ponds was going to the NBA, we probably figured, okay, this might be the end of the talent pipeline for a while. But we knew Mustafa Haran was going to be a good player for the Johnnies. But the thing was, he was actually injured and didn't even play in their game against Arizona. So LJ Figueroa was probably the most underrated star the past couple of years for the Johnnies.
We've seen, in addition to some great play, we've seen some great coaching in this league. Like, Mike Anderson, first year at St. John's, doing a phenomenal job exceeding all expectations, especially this past week. LeVar Jordan at Butler. We already talked about them. And how about DePaul? Oh my God!
It's 12-1 now for DePaul. They get Seton Hall at home to start conference play next Monday night. That's December 30th. And the Xavier Nova games are the opening night in the Big East. A few bye games on Saturday from some of the other teams too.
And another shout out again to the guy that I thought that Georgetown never should have hired, Patrick Ewing, doing a phenomenal job, having never been a college coach at any level of any position. He'd coached in the NBA, doing a phenomenal job coaching that team at Georgetown this year, despite losing 4 key players.
This has been a great season so far for the Big East. And from here on out, it's pretty much play each other. So we'll see how many teams get beat up by going through this, what's going to be a gauntlet of a schedule here. And at this point, David, I'm going to call this the toughest conference schedule of any of the major leagues here.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. I mean, just like the best rankings to go off of. And, even though we've played a football season, you're looking at 11, 12 games so far. The NET, the J&G, still not as good of an indicator as probably your predictive matrix. But as you pointed out, like in KenPom, everybody's in the top 50 except Providence. Excuse me, the top 51.
Right. In the net, they're top 51.
Oh, in net, yeah.
KenPom, DePaul's actually still sticking down there around 62. So there's a few other lower outliers in the KenPoms. But let's take a look at the other half of that Big East destruction of the Big 12 here, which is the Big 12, which only picked up 2 wins of the entire challenge. I think those wins came a couple weeks ago also. They're not even in the past week. But as good of a week as this was in the Big East, this was an awful week for the Big 12, I thought. Nothing but a few bye game wins.
Yeah,
unless you count Oklahoma's 1 point near loss to Central Florida.
Right. Central Florida actually with a bloated record, but not – I mean, they've done it against the pastry cart. West Virginia out to a 10-1 start. I know that you weren't big on them, and I know that they haven't lifted any really heavy weight yet, but I still feel pretty good about them. And I'll start with what I do like. Let's get them up, and let's get Baylor up, because I think we all liked Baylor, but did we think Baylor was top 10 good? And this is a team – that quite frankly has looked as good as anyone in the league. And is this somebody that could land on the 2 line or even maybe the 1 line?
Well, if you were following Baylor in the offseason, you'd have thought, okay, with Mario Kegler, they probably could have been top 10, but without him, not top 10, top 25 maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, the win against Butler, albeit at home, and the neutral floor win against Nova, albeit before Nova really hit their stride. But this is a hell of a profile.
This is a great profile. I'm loving this Baylor team, and I'm starting to come around on West Virginia. We're really going to find out about West Virginia their next 2 games, though.
Yeah.
The neutral court game against Ohio State this weekend, then they start conference play at Kansas. So.
Yeah. Now, if they win those 2, will you be coming around on West Virginia?
If they win those 2, I will be wearing a West Virginia T-shirt next game, next podcast we do.
I don't think
the next fix what we do after January 4th at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is this West. I mean, impressive. The Wichita State win is a solid win. The Northern Iowa win is a very solid win, under the radar-ish, but very solid.
Yeah.
I'm not that convinced about the win at Pittsburgh, but it was a true road win.
Yeah, and it was the backyard brawl. But now to get on to your point, just nothing but a bunch of bye wins. Oklahoma not getting it done against Creighton. Kansas, while on the road at Villanova, it was not a Villanova team that had looked all that good prior to that, although Villanova played really well. We just got done talking about them. Texas having some issues against the Providence team that hasn't exactly looked good.
The Texas loss is one that's just inexplicable to me, just how they got dominated by that team.
And how about Minnie just crushing Okie State? And this is an Okie State team that was ranked in the top 25 for a minute.
You started like them. I'm starting like K-State, Sleek, and suddenly St. Louis beats them. And it was a neutral court technically, I guess, but it was in Kansas City. It was a K-State home game.
Yep, and by the same token, you also had Oklahoma State playing Minnesota down in Tulsa, so that should have been a home game for the Cowboys in effect as well. But they get pounded by the Gophers, who are suddenly looking red hot themselves, that we'll get into in a moment.
Yeah, while I was sitting here saying you looked at 9 teams in the Big East. I mean, right now suddenly I'm looking at the Big 12. Are we looking at a 4 or 5 bid league only, which is low for the Big 12?
Oh, very low. Like, I mean, if they ever get half or fewer, it's an off year for them. Right. Texas Tech, after they had that one moment against Louisville, but struggling with, was it Rio Grande?
Yeah, they beat them by 10 points, but
they were behind a lot of that game.
Yeah, RGV stuck around that game way too long. I guess we still got to talk about Kansas, though. Despite the loss to Villanova, you don't fault them one bit for going on the road and losing 1 point to Villanova. At the end of the day, David, I still think this Kansas team may be the favorite at the end of the day to win the national championship.
Right. And to your point, these are indicators, but like both the games they lost, to Duke and to Nova, they were by very small margins.
I remember they turned the ball over about 30 times in that Duke loss.
Right. So they were
first
small
game of the season.
Yeah, small margins against good teams in games where they did not play well.
Exactly.
So if you can lose a close game to a good team in a game that you did not play well in, that's an indicator that you have a high ceiling. Now, will they finally start playing up to it? They've got Christmas to kind of get themselves under control. The reason I keep saying that, I think our audience knows this, but in case they don't, the 4 hour a day, 20 hour a week rule is out the window over the holidays. You can practice for 10 hours if you want to. So a lot of teams really sharpen things up over the Christmas holiday.
So go one more round of non-conference play before we get into Big 12 play with 2 key games this weekend, the West Virginia-Ohio State game and the Kansas on the road at Stanford.
Yeah, Stanford actually played decently against Kansas last year, and now they'll actually get them at Maples. But unfortunately for the Cardinal fans, it's just been family and friends that have been showing up to their games so far. But they should have a sellout here, or very close to it.
They better be sold out for Kansas. I don't care if it's a holiday break or not.
That was actually on my list of things to talk about when we got to the Pac-12. Stanford has been bad for so long that people have just given up on them, and they don't even realize that they're good now.
Well, let's talk Pac-12 then. That's a good segue. You want to keep going about Stanford a little more?
Well,
Here
yeah, where
here
are
they
the
are,
people?
11-1, David. 11
Yeah,
and 1.
and like not a whole lot of love from the AP or the coaches, not a lot of love from their own fans. This is a good Stanford team. If we pull up their profile, they haven't exactly been knocking off ranked team after ranked team, but I mean they haven't been playing a pastry cart either. And you know,
Just the Oklahoma win, David.
yeah.
Really?
Well, San Francisco, Santa Clara, I mean, these are teams that are at least decent. And I like this Sanford team. And then, like, their loss to Butler, they were right in there for that whole game.
Yeah. I mean, again, we'll learn a lot this weekend with the Kansas game. It's their last non-conference game.
Yeah.
The
And
other team, though, on the right there, Colorado, is the team that, I mean, the huge win this week over Dayton, uh,
yeah.
coming off of the Northern Iowa loss. So I'm still huge on this Colorado team.
I'm bigger on them now. The one knock on them up until yesterday was that, yeah, they look good, but they don't have that signature win against a solid tournament team. They had lost to Northern Iowa at home. They had played decent against Kansas, but weren't really in it at the end. They got one now. This is a really good Dayton team. Maybe not a protected seed. That's where I had them in my bracket today, but easily a top 25 caliber team. And to go and beat them on a neutral floor, that's a win that Colorado needed. I think they'll have other chances, but now at least they got one. I thought it was a huge statement win, both like on and off the court, but it helps their resume, and I think it just helps their overall perception.
It was also good for Colorado because they actually controlled that game for much of regulation, but when the Flyers hit a three to actually force overtime, it felt like they were frankly playing a road game because a lot of Dayton fans had traveled, made the short 5-hour trip to Chicago for that game, but by the same token, once Colorado hit the game-winning three, you could literally hear a pin drop in the United Center when that happened.
Yeah. Interesting event in Chicago. Quick, if you'll permit me a quick segue here, Chad.
Yeah, go ahead for a second.
Dayton played Colorado. Yeah, Dayton played Colorado. Iowa played Cincinnati. Had Dayton played Iowa, the arena would have been sold out. And then had Cincinnati and Colorado been the second game, it would have been a sold-out game with no one at the game.
There was a great Dayton and a great Iowa turnout, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about two other teams, Stalika. On the left there, Utah. A couple of bad losses, but that huge win over Kentucky in Vegas last week. Suddenly resurrecting this profile, and now with the wins over BYU and Mini earlier this year, paying a little more attention to the Utes.
But the funny thing is, it also looks like an Arizona State profile from 2 years ago. They've got wins in quad 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they could very well have losses in quad 1, 2, 3, and 4 by year's end, though. Because that Tulane loss in the Myrtle Beach shootout, that was an eyesore, but they do make up for that with the
loss. I mean, they just looked atrocious in that event.
Yeah, they were bad in that Coastal loss. They lost 2 games in that event. But, David, the team on the right there, USC, haven't really discussed them at all this season, but a solid win over LSU, although maybe LSU we've been overrating all season because it seems like everybody's getting a big win over LSU this year. But nice win over LSU, though.
Right. It was a nice win over LSU, and it was decisive as well. I mean, they just blew them out by, I think, 2 points. And
2 points, yes.
Yeah. But when you look at this profile, I mean, there isn't anything that jumps out at you like road wins against ranked teams, but neutral LSU at TCU, who's good. I think they only have one of their own loss at Nevada, a Nevada team that's suddenly picking up a little bit. Harvard, another neutral floor game. This Harvard team, while not inside the bubble, is still a pretty good team. I mean, does all that decency, those 4 decents, if you add it all together, is this a good profile?
Well, I'll tell you what you have, though, that you haven't had in past years in the Pac-12. You're going to have a chance to pick up a lot more quality wins. You got 3 teams in the top 25 with Oregon, Washington, and Arizona. Colorado right outside the top 25. Yeah. Stanford arguably should be a top 25 team and will be if they win that game. Yeah. And you got some solid metrics, at least, from teams like Utah, Arizona State, Oregon State even. There's only probably the bottom 3 there, Wazoo, UCLA, Cal are kind of garbage, but everyone else is you're going to have more chances for quality wins in conference this year, I think.
Yeah, decent metrics if you're a team like Arizona, for example, but who are their best wins? Illinois at home, Wake Forest on a neutral court?
Yeah, Arizona's hurting a little bit. Let's look at them real quick because, they're to Stalika. Well, finish your point, Stalika, because it was a good one. I just wanted to get them up on the screen.
Well, I just given you two of their best wins, but those are in Tier 2. You look at who they have played so far in Tier 1, it's like, okay, they played well in a road loss at Baylor, but the Gonzaga game is going to be the missed opportunity here.
But those are two top – and the reason that their numbers are so high is that those two losses or two of their three losses were both top 10 losses. Those are Tier 1A losses. I can't fault anybody for a Tier 1A loss.
But let's be honest here. That final score is a little deceptive in the Gonzaga game because
Gonzaga
the Bulldogs really were in control of that one until Arizona made a late run.
And even while they were making their run, they were still in control.
Take a quick look at the week ahead here among Pac-12 teams. We already mentioned the upcoming Stanford-Kansas game. Washington, Hawaii, that's actually coming up later on tonight out in Diamond Head.
Part of the Diamond Head. Washington clearly the better team, but this is still a tough road game for them.
And a couple games to circle here. We mentioned both of these on the Under the Radar show, I think, but Texas Southern at Arizona State, Harvard at Cal coming up this weekend. Two dangerous bye games for the Pac-12.
Yep.
And then Oregon State, a team we thought might be for real, they had their pants pulled down at Texas A&M and had a bad loss there.
Game
Thanks for mentioning that. I forgot that one. Yeah.
Game they really should have won. Texas A&M, not a good team.
Let's go to the SEC at the moment here and talk about one of only, I believe we're down to 3 undefeated teams left in the nation. One of them is in the SEC, the Auburn Tigers, the highest rated of the 3, ranked number 8 this week in both polls. Although they, had some struggles that they got a tough test from NC State, picking up a win in that win, but didn't pull it out.
Tough test from them. Test at side. I mean, they've had some close calls, and while they're ranked 8th, I think that they're the only team in the top 10 that doesn't have a win against a ranked team. So, how good are they really? I still like this Auburn team, but they're eventually they're going to have to beat a ranked team.
Let's pull up their profile.
I still like them more than anybody else in the conference, though. But that might be some faint praise there.
Keep in mind, we were saying the same thing about Auburn at this time a year ago.
I was a lot more harsh on Auburn a year ago at this point, I think.
And I guess that Stalika, let me ask you about this team I pulled up on the right there. An impressive 10-1 overall record, but even a lot worse profile than Auburn's on the left there because they haven't played anybody. And talk about the Razorbacks.
Yeah, a little bit of a bloated record right here. And when they did go on the road to Western Kentucky, obviously that was before the Hilltoppers lose their best player. But
Charles Bassey,
winning at Georgia Tech, I suppose I could give them a little bit of a credit for it.
By 1 point at a bad Georgia Tech team? No, thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, Auburn has beaten NC State. They've beaten a semi-decent – they've beaten Richmond, who's good. They've beaten New Mexico, who's good. Arkansas has not beaten a team that's going to the NIT. They've not beaten a top 100 team in any metric, I don't think.
And they may get exposed at Indiana this weekend. So rest of the league here, though, Georgia squeaking out of had some trouble with Georgia Southern tonight, but did pick up a win there before we started this podcast. Kentucky, we've mentioned their troubles, and bad week with the losses to both Utah and Ohio State.
Yeah, but the Ohio State game, they actually played pretty well. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a really good Ohio State team. They were tons better in that game than they were against Utah. And big game coming up.
And then we continue on down with teams like Tennessee, who lost the game to Cincinnati, Florida, who loses the game to Utah State, and of course, but the win of the conference, Stalika, I got to give you the shout out here. How about Angry Frank and the South Carolina Gamecocks going on the road to the defending national champions on Sunday?
And this was a game that South Carolina had pretty much controlled, tipped the buzzer as well, because Virginia, they barely give up over 50 points a game, but South Carolina scores 70 like it's no problem. They get out to a quick, I think it was 10-4 lead in the first 4 minutes of the game, and even after Virginia made their run in the second half, Gamecocks never panicked, and they were able to gradually push the lead back out to 12 again.
Yeah, this was. I just didn't see this come. This
No,
came
I
out of
didn't either.
absolute nowhere for me. South Carolina had done nothing to impress me. I still don't think their resume is anything special. But this is what we might be seeing in the SEC, which is probably not a good sign for this league in terms of number of bids here. Because as you're heading towards the start of conference play, you've got what in the top 45 of the RPI of the net, two teams, Arkansas and Auburn, and I think Arkansas is falling out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Kentucky should move on up. I think Tennessee will be there at the end of the day also, and probably Florida. But
getting back to South Carolina, though, they had 2 losses in Cancun as well as a double-digit home loss to Houston. There was a reason we didn't see that coming at Virginia.
True.
Yeah.
The upcoming schedule here, the big game, the game of the season for Kentucky most years, David, coming up Saturday, Louisville at Kentucky.
Yeah, and this is normally the game where you go into it saying, well, Louisville's looked a lot better up to this point. I kind of like Louisville, and then Kentucky plays out of their minds, top 10 good, and it seems to stay at that level for the rest of the year. And as much belly aching as there has been, if Kentucky wins that one, I think their fans will forget about anything that happened before, and they'll just kind of be running downhill. This one, always intense. This year's edition should be no different.
And Salika, how about this other huge game on Saturday, though? How about well, I don't want to call it a huge game, but it's a decent game for Tennessee. They really need it against Wisconsin at home.
Well, I think Wisconsin, quite frankly, is going to need a lot more because they haven't done jack outside of Madison this year. Yeah, by the same token, there is going to be an urgency for the Vols because now they've coming off of losses to both Memphis and Cincinnati on the road.
And you want to talk about a team really needing a win at home in what on paper looks like at first glance to be a bye game, but it really isn't, David. Sunday, Liberty at LSU.
Yeah, LSU been kind of disappointing this year. Well, not kind of. They have been going up against an unbeaten Liberty team that kind of needs a win like that on their profile too, because this is it. Liberty's got virtually nothing in the top 200 the rest of the way.
And LSU has been a health spot for teams this year, so
yeah,
they better take advantage.
Let's jump over to the Big Ten for a few minutes here, and when we look at these conference standings, every team played 2 games in December, and everybody won at home, with the sole exception of Michigan State winning at Northwestern. Other than that, all those 1-1s, everybody won their home game, lost their road game. It was amazing amount of parity. I think it might be what we see all season in this Big Ten conference.
It would be, but like one of the things you also haven't seen is teams winning on the road at any point because of the number of bye games. Ohio State did go to North Carolina and get a decent win, although how decent was it? Indiana getting the neutral floor win over Notre Dame. Other than that, they're looking pretty sparse. Penn State has had some good moments, but Michigan getting it done in their exempt tournament. But are the lack of road wins out of conference going to end up being a problem for some of these teams' profiles?
Well, I don't know, because if you look at these metrics, these are strong metrics, way stronger than we saw in the SEC or the Big 12, quite honestly. Look at these predictives again, at least among the top 12 teams. That looks like what we saw when we talked about the Big East, probably even better than that Big East there.
But if you want to also talk about missed opportunities, look at the Illini, who went to St. Louis and ended up losing the bragging rights game to Missouri.
That was a rough loss.
Yeah. Maryland hasn't lifted any heavyweight either. I mean, they've sort of been a little bit underwhelming.
And a bad loss to it. I mean, Seton Hall is supposed to be good this year, but it was an undermanned Seton Hall team that was just coming off getting thrashed by Rutgers, and Maryland loses to them. So.
Yeah, so Penn State kind of been surprisingly good. Ohio State certainly starting off unranked now all the way up to number 2. Minnesota playing a lot better in recent weeks as well.
Yeah, Minnesota's starting to look good. Nice win over Oklahoma State. We mentioned that already. The upcoming schedule in the Big Ten, let's see what we've got here. We've got the Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Arkansas, Indiana games we mentioned. We also mentioned the Ohio State, West Virginia game.
That's a big one Sunday.
Why don't we pull up the Minnesota profile? Because this is one, when I was initially reviewing the Puppets bracket earlier, I thought he's got to be on acid choosing the Gophers. But when you remember what they've done during the past week, winning at home against Ohio State and then getting a neutral court win against Oklahoma State, it does offset a little bit of some of the losses. But keep in mind, their strength of schedule right now is number 3 because look at who those losses have come against. Butler and Iowa on the road,
Yeah.
all at home, and then you have the game against Oklahoma that was in South Dakota, and also the road loss at Utah when the Utes were actually playing some of their better ball.
Yeah, they better not sleep on Florida International this weekend. Also, this is a decent Florida International team. We discussed them on the Under the Radar show. They're one of the better teams in Conference USA. They should win the game, but
right, you don't want to.
Minnesota has a tendency to lose a game like this too. So
yeah,
let's. I guess we should do the ACC at some point here and talk about David. I got to ask you, with the loss to South Carolina, is there a coaching problem in Virginia suddenly?
Gee, I mean, you and I have been discussing this on Twitter, and I mean, you got to think that seat is starting to get warm. Will Tony Bennett be the coach at the end of the year?
I thought you were going to say Joby's seat had gotten so hot that he wouldn't be able to get on tonight.
Yeah, but I mean, Joby's so upset he's not even on the show tonight. I mean, Tony Bennett, in trouble. Like we have gone down. Like just a for instance, I don't remember if this is tweeted or not, but you look at the state of Maine. No real good teams in the state of Maine, and Virginia, not even the best team in the state of Maine. I mean. How can you not see this guy's on the hot seat?
Well, if you look at the ACC overall, though, Stalika, seriously, we only have 4 teams in the top 25. A little low for this conference. We normally see a little bit more than that, I think. But we have Louisville, Virginia, Duke, Florida State. We do not have the North Carolina Tar Heels in the top 25, though.
Are they even?
It'd be hard to press to argue the Tar Heels being in here right now on the cusp of losses to both Wofford and Gonzaga, but how soon the Tar Heels are going to be able to get healthy is going to be a little bit of a question mark.
Yeah, let's take a look at that North Carolina profile now. And, are we – I mean, is there danger here, David? Is there a danger that this may not be an NCAA tournament team?
There's danger of that. I don't know how realistic it is, simply because when you look at that schedule and you consider that they're not at full strength, they're always 1 week away or a string of 3 or 4 wins away from completely turning their season around and their profile around. So, while there's danger of it, there's just so many opportunities for this team to get the kind of wins that they need. That I just can't think that the season will end without them doing it.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you there. I mean, and as you said, when you look at those 5 losses, 4 of them are Tier 1A losses, the top half of Tier 1. But John, the team on the right there, I don't think we've spoken about them much at all this season. They've just been kind of hanging out there in the middle of the top 25. Florida State, picking up some solid wins, nothing bad. How good is this Florida State team?
Yeah, Florida State went a little bit under the weeds after they had their season opening loss at Pitt. I mean, they did rebound with a title in the Emerald Coast Classic thanks to wins against Purdue and Tennessee, and that was actually after they had won down at the Swamp against a Florida team that's looking a little bit iffy themselves. But other than that, losing at Indiana, there's no shame in that this year. You would think there'd actually be more true home games for the Noles, but they've only played 6 of them so far, and they've managed to hold serve in those.
Yeah, and I think this Florida State team is one that we got to keep a little bit more eye on as we go.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially if North Carolina is going to fall off the pace a little bit in the conference, and I mean, we don't expect anybody like a team like Boston College or Pitt to really remain up top there very long.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at the upcoming schedule for this week among the ACC. We've mentioned a few of these games already, including the Louisville, Kentucky game. Yale at North Carolina. That North Carolina better not overlook this Yale team.
Yeah, that one is wow. They're really good. Then they're really going to be sweating if they lose that game, which is conceivable. This is a pretty good Yale team.
And we had also mentioned under the radar last night that App State actually came off of a 2-0 start in Sun Belt play and could possibly pick off NC State, but that's still rather going to be unlikely.
Mm-hmm. We're pretty far into the show already. We haven't discussed the new number one team in the nation, so I think it's about time we did so. The Gonzaga Bulldogs, the sixth number one team in the nation so far this season, sixth different team. The record for November, December number one teams before the season was 3. So that tells you how crazy it's been at the top of the standings so far.
Yeah, and is it crazy, or are we just not voting for the right teams? I mean, it could be one or the other. I will say this: Gonzaga 13-1. Their only loss to Michigan, albeit it was rather decisive, but a really, really, really impressive.
Well, I'm gonna do a little quick timeout on that because David, it was their third game in 3 days when they lost that game to Michigan as well in the battle for Atlantis. And
it was also Michigan's.
And it was also Michigan, and they had just come off a 1-point win over Oregon. I can't fault them for it. I can't fault them for that Michigan loss one bit. You're not going to play 3 games in 3 days again this season. Not going to happen.
I guess they won't because their conference tournament's a ladder.
They would buy into the semifinals, presumably.
Well, I was promoting them, Chad. I think that they are the correct number one. And when you look at them, while we've had 6 different ones, we might also have a team that holds on to the number one spot for 13 straight weeks.
Let's pull up their profile real quick here.
Although by the same token, keep in mind Gonzaga's also had troubles against BYU at home in recent memory. And
that is not Gonzaga. Okay, that's Gonzaga.
There's Gonzaga, Detroit, and then they go into conference play.
Yeah, and then the road wins at Arizona, at Washington. These are 2 teams that probably won't lose a combined total of 5 games at home all year, and 2 of those 5 will be to Gonzaga. I mean, this is a really, really good team. And then you've got no ranked teams the rest of the way, at least no one that's currently ranked.
Right. Well, St. Mary's is getting some votes. They're 33rd and 38th in the polls, and then you've got to have the 2 games against BYU also. I'm going to put both BYU and St. Mary's on the screen.
I like BYU coming to life.
BYU has the top tier wins, but has more losses. St. Mary's only has 1 big negative. These are 2 teams. Sleek, would you agree with me that if they can, avoid any toe stubs in the Mountain West and just end up losing games either to each other or to Gonzaga, they should be on the board at the end of the year?
Well, we're pretty sure Gonzaga's not going to stub their toes, but you can't tell me that St. Mary's and BYU, they're not going to slip up at least once against teams like Santa Clara or San Francisco. Those are not easy places to win in the West Coast Conference, but it looks a little deceptive because Gonzaga has made it look easy for the better part of a decade and a half.
Yeah, in the league, some bloated records out there. I mean, while no one's really gone out and beaten anybody really good other than St. Mary's and BYU, but Santa Clara 12-2, Pacific, who is ridiculously bad, 10-3. You've got 9-3 San Francisco, albeit against pastry carts. But I mean, these are teams with a lot of momentum going in. To while maybe they're not top 25 good, they're certainly not as bad as they used to be. The overall top to bottom quality of this league is improving.
It is, and that's nice to see the top to bottom improving. And maybe we'll be at a point in a year or 2 from now we could talk about somebody other than Gonzaga, St. Mary's, BYU as well. But
right, yeah,
I think this season that's where it's going to be. There's the upcoming schedule. No real games to note. A bunch of bye games this week for this league.
Yeah.
Unless you want to say Harvard at San Francisco, but Harvard's been very disappointing.
Yeah, they have been.
And it's going to be quite the trip out west for Harvard with both Cal and San Francisco in the same swing.
Let's jump over the American for a few moments here and talk about the top 2 teams in this league. Wichita State breaking into the top 25 in the coaches poll, just missed in the AP today.
Yeah.
10-1. Memphis now into the top 10 in both polls. I think it's these 2 teams and nobody, in my opinion, David. But
SMU has impressed me at times, but again, you look at their overall strength of schedule; it is less than stellar.
They struggled at home with Georgia State tonight. They did get the win, but
I wanted to think that Cincinnati had finally kick-started their season. They looked good against Tennessee, but then they followed it up, not looking good against Iowa. Houston, if they can win the Diamond Head, they're going to get a chance to play Washington in all likelihood, and if they beat them out there, then I think that they'll finally sort of be rolling. So, like, maybe they'll be in the discussion with Wichita and Memphis. Memphis, we sort of hinted this earlier. James Wiseman will not return this season. He was slated to come back January 12th. Shortly after the semester ended, going in the Christmas break, he opted not to return. That's all we really know. I don't want to speculate what his reasons were. But
what was announced was that he's going to begin preparing for the NBA draft. That's
okay.
That's what
was announced.
That's
but
what
honestly,
announced.
from a chemistry standpoint, I think Memphis is going to be better off because this is the unit they have been starting out on the floor for the better part of 8 or 9 games. Wait. No.
I gotta say something here. Wiseman played 3 games. What do you average? About 25 points and 15 rebounds in those 3 games. You can't say they're better off without him.
But one of those
they
can win without him.
It's easy to pad the stats in that one.
I agree they can win without him. I'm not saying that they're better off without him.
Yeah, because, I mean, like the one game they lost to Oregon, he played in. Now, Oregon is exceptionally good, and I want to say that game was in Portland, while not in Eugene. Yeah, but they have been really, really good without him. They'll probably remain in the top 25 for the rest of the year. And this is a dangerous team. Now, is it a 1-seed caliber team? I don't think that it is. Were they with Wiseman? I don't know. We didn't really get to see him play against anybody because as you just said, he played against Oregon and they lost, and then he played in 2 bye games. But still a really good Memphis team, maybe one of the best in the conference. Anything else on Memphis? Because I've got some stuff on Wichita State.
Yeah, now that's enough. Memphis with one more bye game against New Orleans, and they get to conference play. But what hello on Wichita State also?
Yes, Wichita State 2 years ago, protected seed, and I think this. Let's back it up even further than that. Wichita State in their final year 2 years ago. 3 years ago, their final year in the Missouri Valley, they were ranked in the top 10 or close to it and earned a 10 seed because of just a shoddy profile largely because of their conference. They went down to Kentucky in the round of 32 in a game they really had a chance to win. They returned much of that team the following year, were in the rankings the whole year, earned a protected seed, but then lost in the round of 64. They followed that up with a slow start last year due to a roster overhaul, and everybody sort of forgot about them. But they finished the season last year 14-4. And while the American is not the ACC or the Big East, it is still a really, really strong conference. And to go 14-4 in their last 18 games is pretty impressive. They're essentially 24-5 in their last 29 games. Why did everybody forget about Wichita State? You shouldn't have.
No, I agree with you completely, and you can see their schedule up there. They got Abilene Christian. They actually got a home game against Ole Miss coming up on January 4th. That's part of a SEC American mini.
The sloppy seconds from the SEC Big 12.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
But actually, Memphis has Georgia in that same event on January 4th. I said Memphis only had one bye game left. There's 2 more non-conference games left there.
Yeah, but this was a freshman-heavy team that got off to a slow start but finished strong. It's all back this year.
I'm buying in on Wichita State. I think that this is a solid, single-digit NCAA tournament seed. Maybe bordering on like a 6 seed type of team by the end of the day. Maybe better. Who knows?
Yeah.
If we're buying in on teams like Wichita State and Memphis, what about the Temple Owls? This is another team that's going to be kind of sitting on the fence.
What about them? I am not sold on this Temple team at the moment.
I am. Having said that, they don't always bring it.
I mean, the loss to Missouri was ugly.
Missouri was pretty ugly.
They lost the game to Miami. I mean, they beat USC, and that's it. They struggled a little bit with Ryder.
But this was a team that looked like they might beat Maryland down in Orlando, but unfortunately were not able to finish the job in that one.
And if they're going to do anything non-conference, it's got to be the Villanova game on February 16th because that's the only key non-conference game they have left. And otherwise, you got to do it against Memphis and Wichita.
But by the same token, this is not an invincible Villanova team like we've seen for the past 4 or 5 years in the Big East. Granted, it's still going to be a very tough game, but they don't have that cloak of invincibility like in recent years.
Just one more note on Temple, quick on the schedule. They only get Memphis once. It's on the road also, so that makes that game even more key on February 5th.
Yeah, I still like this Temple team. They've had their moments. The loss to Mizzou was pretty ugly, and then Miami did not play well in that game. Still had a chance to win it. I want to say that game was in Brooklyn, in front of dozens of people.
Yeah. Let's jump over to the Atlantic 10 and talk a little bit about this Dayton team first of all. That did get that did actually suffer the loss to Colorado, but it's still, I think, a very good team. Picked up a win tonight over Grambling, David.
Yeah, Dayton's interesting because let's pull up their resume for starters, because one of the things we were talking about going into that Colorado game was their limited opportunity against first ballot caliber teams. So teams in the top half of the NCAA tournament, they didn't really have any wins against anybody that was clearly in that range, and you had this Colorado game circled as being a big chance. They didn't get it. Now, this is a team, at least right now, I think it's a situation where the team is much better than what their resume indicates. There's no top 25 wins on it. There's really not, only one maybe tournament win on it against St. Mary's, but
look at those predictive metrics
look
up
at the
there.
predictive rank. This is a good Dayton team.
Look at their net is at a 14 right now. Also, their strength of schedule is 16 overall in the nation. I think it's going to hold up. I mean, there's enough quality competition here at the A10. When you look at these overall records from teams like George Mason, Duquesne, Richmond, St. Louis, VCU, even Rhode Island and the Bonnies, and Stalika, let me throw a little Duquesne at you. They were the most recent undefeated team to go down with a shocking loss against UAB, I thought.
I don't know if it was necessarily shocking when you consider they were playing, a game in Akron, Ohio on Saturday, and then a game down in St. Petersburg on Sunday. But now the question suddenly is, would you take George Mason or would you take Duquesne? Because George Mason, they have a slightly better schedule, but they also have a similarly gaudy record. But I don't think George Mason really has any.
Wait a second. The game against Austin Peay on Saturday was also in St. Petersburg. That was not.
Yeah, it was the St. Pete's Classic.
They were in St. Petersburg both days. They were not in Akron, Ohio. They were in Akron about a week ago against Radford.
Well, they played the game on Sunday like they were in Akron the day before.
Yeah, but go ahead, David. You were commenting on them.
I kind of like them both. I don't know if I like either one of them as NCAA tournament teams, but I like them both as programs that are really going in the right direction. Richmond had sort of a loss that has you holding your nose a little bit, but all in all, I still like them. St. Louis.
Radford loss there for Richmond. Go ahead.
Real bad. VCU not sort of playing up to their potential, I don't think. I mean, we just got done praising Wichita State. They went there and didn't get the win, but all in all, the A10 is the table set for how many teams are going to land inside the bubble? Is the table set for this to be another really good year for the A10, something we have not seen in a while?
I don't know, because you look here, VCU and St. Louis, who I think has done pretty well with the win at Boston College, a neutral court win over Kansas State now, and nothing bad in the loss column. These are the teams that are going to be fighting for at-large bids. They're going to have to do it with conference wins. So at the end of the day, I think you're looking at a 3-bid league is where my thoughts are. I cannot see it be more than 3. I could see it only being 2.
So you know what this means, right? The Arch Baron Cup is going to mean something this year.
One of the most meaningful Arch Baron Cups in history.
In history.
Absolutely. A week ahead in the Atlantic 10.
All right.
What have we got here? We've got Richmond at Alabama, Duquesne at Marshall.
Richmond at Alabama, that's a big one.
We got
George Mason at TCU, that's a big one.
St. Bonaventure at Buffalo. These are 2 teams that are nearby local rivals playing each other head-to-head, which does not happen in the city of San Antonio.
No, it doesn't.
But the major difference is Buffalo has played much better of late than the Bonnies have, who seem to be treading water throughout the year.
How about Davidson going to Vanderbilt? Remember at the beginning of the year when we thought Davidson was a top 25 caliber team? Me neither. I've gone back and deleted all that.
All right. We have one last conference to get to for the night, and this conference is the one is the other remaining undefeated team we haven't yet discussed. But first, before we speak about what's going on in the Mountain West, we've got to recall that this conference is brought to you by the ConExpo-Con AGG 2020, taking place at the Thomas Mack Center in Las Vegas, Nevada, from March 10th through 14th.
Yes.
Register now at ConExpo-Con.
Register now. Yeah, you can register now.
Look where you can go and look at this down here.
Look at all of that stuff.
You can stand among all these tractors and watch video of more tractors.
Wow, that is, and this is going on in Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas during championship week.
Oh,
at the same location that the Mountain West Conference should have been playing its tournament.
Is this where we're going to be holding the Hoops HD selection meetings this year?
We are going to be calling this conference during championship week.
Mountain West, though, San Diego State. David, the number one team in the net ranking right now is not Gonzaga, not Ohio State, not Kansas. It's San Diego State.
Yeah, well, San Diego State is a legitimate top 15 team. I think the voters got that right. They are unbeaten. You pull up their profile, they are lacking in wins against other ranked teams. But what is their – oh, no, they Iowa.
They beat Iowa. They beat Creighton. They won at neutral courts. They won at BYU. This is why they're number one, not only in the net, in the ESPN strength of resume. Our Joby's JNG ratings, they're number 2 in the nation.
Yeah, so – and this is, beating Iowa pretty easily. That win at BYU, real impressive. You and I watched that. I think I don't remember if we were on a call or not, but no trouble at all with Creighton in that one game. So this is
they beat Utah also, yeah.
Yeah, look at just not who they beaten, but some of these margins of victories against these NIT-ish type of teams or worse. They have blown past them the way you would expect a top 15 team to do it. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is not overreacting to an under-the-radar team that's good. This is a for-real top 15 team. They really are.
I got to tell you, Salika, let me ask you this. If they win January 4th at Utah State, the game you just circled, if they win that game, is there any game they lose?
Well, the other games I would potentially be looking at would be 2 weeks later at home against Nevada, which is going to be a bit of a trap. And then they go to New Mexico on January 29th. By the same token,
yeah, that's going to be. There are some snake pits that they got to go into. And it is inconceivable that they may slip up. But even if they say they finish the season with 2 losses, I still think they're a top 15 caliber.
A top 15. I think this is a protected seed team.
Yeah.
If you're saying top 15, you're talking about a
they should be.
Seed. If they go undefeated, they're a 1 seed. Who thought we'd be talking San Diego State 1 seed at the start of the season?
I didn't think that they would be 1 seed good, but
even their predictive metrics are there. Number 6 in the Sagarin ratings.
Yeah. We've been really down on this conference the last couple years. We've never done it, or did we do it once? We've never relegated them.
We did. 1 year, a few years ago, we actually relegated this conference under the radar.
It's probably still the weakest multi-bid league, but we've got 3 teams. We've got 1 team that's legit top 15. And we've got 2 other teams that are pretty good in New Mexico and Utah State, and a Nevada team that is playing better. Is this the best year the Mountain West has had in the last 3 or 4 years?
I think it's going to hinge on what this Utah State team does. And Salika, they picked up a real nice win over Florida this week. And
it was one that the Aggies desperately needed, though, because they were already coming off of a loss against BYU down in, I think it was Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City,
yeah. In the Beehive Classic or whatever it is they call it.
But that win there, I think that has Utah State right back on track for an at-large bid if they, do what's expected of them in conference play. 3-4 losses tops.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to be losing to anyone outside this circle of trust, like let's say San Diego State, Nevada, New Mexico. You can't be losing to anyone else outside of that and really expect to be taken seriously.
As much as we sort of like the top of the league, you're really holding your nose from UNLV on down. This is really ugly.
Bad stuff down there.
Yeah.
So that's
because
what hurts some of these
teams. Boise State in the Diamond Head Classic, and
Jesus Christ, it's even
with the Broncos.
Yeah, it's like, look at how many of those teams are 200 or worse. Virtually all of them.
And that's the problem with this league is that your strength of schedules are going to get pulled down when you're playing 2 games against Air Force and 2 games against Wyoming and the like.
Yeah.
I've brought up the term chasm before in conferences. This is a prime example right here.
Yeah, for sure.
Boise State is, like as you mentioned, is going to be playing a game on Wednesday. We don't know who their opponent's going to be yet, but it's going to be in the I guess it's going to be the fifth place game in the Diamond Head. So they have a chance to pick up 2 wins of that event, but not much else to really pay attention to this week among the Mountain West teams. I guess on that note, that's everything, isn't it?
I think that it is.
All right. Well, I guess we'll go to final thoughts then. Slika, you want to start us off?
Well, we had touched on it earlier about the Big 12 having a bad couple weeks, losing the inaugural Big East Big 12 battle. So now they're
decimated in it. Getting decimated. Let's call it for what it is.
Yep, we'll call a spade here, but their moment of redemption is probably going to come against the SEC come mid-January, and that's where a matchup like Texas Tech hosting Kentucky now is suddenly going to hold a lot more weight right here, because that is a game that the Red Raiders, they've been playing much better in December, but they absolutely have to have that one now, especially against a Kentucky team that, who knows, could they be on the bubble come March?
I wouldn't go that far, but David.
Yeah, we're kind of going into holiday mode. No games on the 24th. The 4 last round of the Diamond Head Classic on the 25th. Nothing on the 26th, and I think only 1 or 2 on the 27th. So, we're kind of going to be hibernating a bit. We'll still be out there on Twitter, but hopefully everybody watching this can have a good holiday, a safe holiday. I know that it's not that way for everybody. For some people, it's really stressful. For some people, it's really upsetting. But whatever it is that you do, hopefully you can get away from it and, hell, turn on the Diamond Head. I'll be watching.
And I'll echo that and just want to take a chance to wish everybody out there very happy holidays. We will be back with one more show before the end of the year. I think we're actually recording one on New Year's Eve. We're still up in the air, but we'll figure that out. But I guess on that note, on behalf of John Slika and David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Happy holidays, everybody, and we'll talk to you again real soon.